and I look at you, I don't see you in a frame, and I'm pretty certain you don't see me in a frame. Frame does not exist in nature. It is not a natural phenomenon. It's entirely artificial. And if you refer again to our moving head and our moving eyes, it has nothing in your lives that is really representational of anything apart from the notions of which we put it as a representation for art. Because after all, the frame, the cinema frame, arrived essentially from copying painting, when painting divorced itself from architecture, what, around about 1350. And the theatre copied painting, the proscenium arch. You don't really notice the proscenium arch here, but you can understand what it is. Here's the picture frame, which would normally, if this was a theatre or an opera house, frame live action. And we look at all ballet, and we look at all dance, and we look at all theatre, again within the frame. And of course, when you open your newspaper or your magazine, again, there's the frame. So we have, for a long time, I think through laziness, and through a desire, I suppose, to be convenient for the manufacturers of the money in economics behind these phenomena, have engaged in the notion of a frame. So I think we have to get rid of the frame. It is not part of your appreciation of the world. It's an artificial situation. And if it's man-made, it can be unman-made. Tyranny number 2, I think I've already touched on it. Cinema really has to break, has to cut that umbilical cord that exists between the cinema and the bookshop, so it can run free and not be derivative of notions of narrative, of storytelling. If you want to be a storyteller, go and write a book. Don't waste your time and my time interfering with an imagistic medium. This is not a literary meeting place. This is not a place to exchange words. It's a place to exchange ideas by pictures. Third tyranny, and this is very difficult and maybe might upset you, we have to change our attitude about the actor. Any actors in the audience? Any actors in the audience? Male or female? Any pretend actors in the audience? I always think that probably one of the best definitions of an actor is somebody who is trained to pretend that they're not being watched. And the moment that pretense collapses, it's suddenly lousy acting, isn't it? And isn't that a strange definition? If we train these people, 6 years at RADA, all the acting schools that exist all over the world, trying to persuade these people that they have to pretend that they're not being watched. Isn't that an underuse of intelligent actors? Can actors be intelligent? I was hoping there would be some actors in the audience so I could bully you, but I don't think anybody's going to volunteer. So, I don't think the cinema was invented to be a playground for Johnny Depp. It's not Johnny Depp's fault, however much we might admire him. It's the way we use actors, really, I believe, seriously has to be changed. And maybe my fourth tyranny from within, maybe the most difficult and apparently contrary of all, and I'm looking to see if there are any cameras watching me. Yes, there's one there. Cameraman there, I think, yes. Okay, 2. Oh, one here. You have to, there's somebody else over there. You have to, I think cinema has to get rid of the camera. Now you might find that an extraordinary, contrary occupation. Let me give you 2 quotations, probably the 2 greatest visualists, the people with the most, as we say, intelligent power about organizing images in the 20th century was Picasso, who said, "I do not paint what I see, but I paint what I think." And Eisenstein, the greatest filmmaker ever, who goes to California on his way to Mexico and says that Walt Disney is the greatest and only filmmaker ever. Now, if you make a connection between those 2 sorts of ideas, you can see how, in a curious way, the camera is detrimental to their activity. You can see how the camera gets in a way, figuratively, for Picasso, who is painting what he thinks and not what he sees. And the miserable camera can only simply see, it certainly cannot think, however clever this gentleman is behind it. It's not the camera that thinks, it's the gentleman behind it who thinks. So in a sense, it's a bit like a measurement of earthquakes. You know, the Richter scale, I suppose what the average dangerous earthquake, you know, perhaps not in this part of the world, but certainly in South America, would be Richter 5. And anything above Richter 5 suddenly gets very, very dangerous. And in a curious way, cinema has started at Richter 5 instead of Richter 0, which brings us back to Walt Disney. And you can see why Eisenstein, the greatest filmmaker, I certainly believe, in the 119 years we've had of cinema, he wasn't concerning himself with Walt Disney, the businessman, very good businessman, or the anti-Semitic, had some virulent ideas about the Jews, or being a sentimentalist who constantly played in a children's playground. He was saying, and using Walt Disney, I suppose, as the ultimate creator of cinema, because he starts at Richter 0. There is nothing on the sheet before a cartoonist makes a mark. And surely that really is an act of creation, not recreation. I must be careful not to say that word quickly because it becomes a recreation, which maybe is the definition of Hollywood anyway. But there is a way that, in a curious way, we somehow started cinema too high up the scale of mimesis. And I don't think mimesis, which simply means repeating or copying what God has already created, but we've been given the most extraordinary thing in the universe, which is our imagination, to be able to create, in a sense, from ground Richter 0. So let me run through quickly again. We have to get rid of the frame. We have to get rid of the text relationship of cinema to the bookshop. We have to really seriously consider our use of actors, and we have to get rid of the camera. Now that, of course, is a very subjective, personal credo.